Could everyone grab a seat if they're going to sit? Otherwise, stand and wait for everything to happen. I'll call the meeting to order. I have 7:33. There is a quorum being present. We need 30, so we have plenty for that. The tellers for this evening, if we have to question some votes or have a secret ballot, we have Carla Christensen, Teresa Mansfield, Kathy McKinnon, Ann Trudeau, James Trudeau, Mary Wilhelm, Ellie Wolf, and Wendy Fossa. I believe they all have green badges on. Is that correct? Before we get started, can we do the Pledge of Allegiance? If everyone could stand up, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before you seat, could you please say hi to your neighbor if you don't know him? That's what I just said. Good evening. Thanks. Could all have a seat? We can get started with this. A couple of announcements. We have voting cards again this time. When we call for a vote, I'm going to have you raise it in your seat. You don't have to stand. You don't have to say aye. We're going to go right to just raising the card so the tellers can count it easier. If we do happen to have a secret ballot that is called for, I'll instruct on that process when that happens or when and if that happens, but I'm not going to go through that now because if we don't, I've wasted a lot of time. I will take a motion to waive the reading of the special town meeting. Any second? All those in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. Any non-resident, non-voter? I'm sitting over there. Just have one? Just one. Oh, sorry, two. You guys got to get together. And we have a group that will present, if everyone is willing to let them present. They are not residents, but they're architects and have done some design work and some work on the presentation that is appropriate for both of these articles, so our preference is to have them speak first for about 10 minutes and do that presentation before we get into the articles. If nobody objects, if somebody objects, let me know. Is there any objection to that? Awesome. Then we will have them make their presentation and then we'll move into the articles.
Hi, everyone. My name is Philip O'Brien with Johnson Roberts Associates. I have Stuart Roberts here with me. I also have the owner's project manager here, Tim Dorman from NV5. I've got a short presentation for you. We are coming towards the end, I hope, of the site selection process portion of our study. And so at this point, we've looked at a bunch of different sites. I'm going to point these out quickly here on a map and then walk you through some of the highlights of where we are. A couple of these plans that I'm going to show you have a building on them, maybe some parking, but we haven't designed a building yet. That's going to come in the next phase. And but we know enough about the building at this point to be able to kind of drop it down on our site and see whether or not it fits and what the issues might be. So I'm going to start here with the map of the town. This is the center of Essex, and that radius right there is a 1 mile radius, and it is centered on the existing site. The existing site, as you probably know, at the town hall, police fire station is quite large, includes the ball fields and so forth, but right at the center of that, of this radius is the existing police fire station. This was the parameters for sites that were close to the center of town for a variety of reasons that work best for the public safety facility. So we looked at a bunch of different sites in that zone. We looked at one on the east side of the causeway, but for the most part we looked at sites on the western side. We looked at sites including the site where this building is right now, we looked at privately owned sites. The difference between the privately owned sites on this slide are yellow, privately owned, and then it's showing up as kind of a purple color here, is sites that the town owns, which includes the transfer station, the existing site, and then the cemetery site. Some yellow sites include the site that we're on across the street. There was two on Western Ave, and then there was a couple further up John Wise Avenue. I know you can't read all of these titles, but I'm going to take you through some of those highlights at this point and point out what worked. But basically what we were looking at is whether or not a site will support. The first choice is a combined police fire station. It works the best, saves the most money in terms of the construction cost. And in leaving that, we look for sites that would be suitable to sit the building on either together or separately. So as part of this process, we put together a matrix, and this is a matrix about the private properties that were reviewed, and they kind of break down in a couple different categories. Doesn't look very yellow, but that's in the yellow category is commercial properties. We also looked at undeveloped properties. That's basically empty fields, farmland, things like that. And then we also looked at residential properties. They varied in sizes from something that's really just too small to work, as some of these that are up here at about an acre. We really need closer to an acre and a half as an absolute minimum in order to fit at least one of the buildings on, and a combined facility really is better at about 2.5 or 3 acres. So the issues basically with these is that for the most part, not a lot of willing sellers for the properties that we looked at. Basically, the process worked. We studied these things very quickly to see what would work, determine which ones would function, and then gave that information to the town so that they could approach the landowner. So obviously the first thing that we looked at is the existing property, and this is a portion of the existing town hall, police and fire station site. The existing police and fire station is here. And that's just the edge of the town hall there with the parking lot that's associated with it. And this is the ball field that sits out in there. This is Shepherd Drive that runs in, that goes back to the parking up in here. We started very early on looking, and these are actually hand sketches from one of the first presentations we made to the committee, looking at additions and renovations at the existing building for use as a police station. And then we also looked at a 2-story fire station that sits in the park. This sketch right here quickly told us that this site isn't really suitable for a building of this size. It really bites right into the parking lot, but more importantly, it bites right into these blue lines here represent the flood zone. You really can't build in the flood zone unless you build higher than the flood zone, so that if there is a flood, it doesn't come in and flood out the building. So we need to add elevation in this area, and then that space needs to be replicated elsewhere on site so that you can collect that water. And there's really no good place to do that. Basically, from here back, the rest of the site just gets more and more into the marsh. And we don't really have the room to do that. This really gets right into an area where we have identified hazardous materials that would have to be remediated, removed. All the soil that's surrounding them would have to come out. We're into the ball fields, all the memorials, and the grading in this site really just doesn't work. There's really no way for the trucks to get out onto the street without trying to get out onto Shepherd Drive. And there's really just not enough room without having to do a whole lot of work. And the more work that we do, the worse that this flood zone gets. And basically, it just doesn't fit there. There just isn't enough space on site to replicate the flood zone area that we need to remove. So we took a look at the other site very early on in the process that the town owned that was identified that we could look at. This is the edge of the cemetery site at John Wise Avenue. This is the cemetery back in here. Anybody who's been in the cemetery, at the back end of the cemetery, there's a couple of small outbuildings there. That's them. This is John Wise Avenue that runs along this way. At this end over here is facing north. This basically shows a one-story fire station, apparatus bays that pull directly out onto John Wise Ave. which is certainly the traditional way to do a fire station. The issue here then is that the trucks pull directly out onto the street, but when they return from a call, they need to stop traffic so that they can back the trucks back in. This probably needs signalization, flashing yellow light, and a light that will turn red in this area in order to be able to do that. It's also extremely tight up to the property lines to try to get in the parking that is required. We looked at doing a multi-story building here. We also looked at a multi-story building on the last slide I showed you. The overall size of the building doesn't actually get much smaller because there's not a lot of things on the first floor that can really go up. Most of the things that you can see here really need to stay down on the ground where the trucks are. We've got a meeting room and a public lobby and some public toilets, and that really should stay on the ground floor for accessibility reasons. And so some of this material could go upstairs, but then as soon as you take these things and put them up, we need 2 exit stairs and an elevator, and that just adds more space down onto the lower floor again. And it adds about 1,000 square feet to the building. So it's not a real cost-effective solution. But again, this isn't really a building design, and it's one of those things that we will look at when we look at the final design for this building. Yes, thank you. The other thing I would point out is that the grading, these are topographical lines here that run across the back from front to back. So it is high along the street, and then the natural grade drops to the back. And so in order to support the building and the vehicles coming out onto the road, we need to fill in this area right here. And because we're so close to the property line, it basically means that we will need retaining walls that get quite high as they get across the backside of the site and then back down again. And it also limits the amount of space that we have on site to do stormwater management. And so it makes this site doable, but it's a little bit more expensive in order to do that. And when I say a little bit, it's considerably more expensive to get this much building and development onto that portion of the site, but we think it will work. Thank you. So, based on a request from the committee, we also took a look at what the John Wise site would look like, and that's it right there. If you also had the additional property next door, and we chose this site here to take a look at, and basically what this means for us is that we can take the apparatus bays, rather than having them come out directly onto John Wise Avenue, we could actually have them come out from the side, so you don't have to look at the doors from the street. And that also gives you the opportunity to create a pull-in where the trucks that come in when they're returning from a fire can pull in onto this larger apron and then back in without having to stop traffic. It also gives us the opportunity to build the parking that we need in a consolidated place. It's probably going to save a little bit more money to do that. And it gives us a little bit more room between the development and the property lines so that we don't have to have those real dramatic retaining walls. And it gives us a little bit more room to do things like stormwater management on site, which gets a lot harder when the site is tight. So that's an example of the types of things information that we were providing the committee so that they could talk to landowners and so forth. This is the existing site. We're going back and looking at it again. The existing building is shown dotted. It's a little hard to see, but it kind of steps in and around here. And this is showing a new 2-story police station, basically, that sits on the footprint of the existing building. This site works reasonably well, fits within the setback, and the building isn't much larger than the existing police and fire station now, and essentially works about the same way in that we'd have an upper floor with offices and public space in it, and then a lower floor that was accessible from Shepherd Drive. And the floor-to-floor heights work better with this grading because we don't need as much height in the police station garages at the lower level as we do at a fire station. Is that the last slide? That's it. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. Just to point out, if they're in the debate discussion process, if there are design questions, I'm going to ask the consultants to address those. So just continue on with allowing that to happen would be nice. So moving to some motions on articles.
I, Lisa O'Donnell, move that the vote for Article 2 be taken before the vote for Article 1.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. So we will address Article 2 before Article 1. Mr. Fippen, Article 2.
Yes, I, Peter Fippen, move that the town vote to transfer from the Board of Public Works in its capacity as the Cemetery Commission for cemetery purposes to the Board of Selectmen for purposes of a public safety building or buildings and/or associated features, the care, custody, management, and control of a portion of the Spring Street Cemetery shown on Assessor's Map 128, Lot 102, and on a plan recorded with the Essex South District Registry of Deeds in Plan Book 153, Plan 50, which portion to be so transferred abuts John Wise Ave and was approximately shown as potential future site for public safety building on a plan that has been on file with the town clerk entitled Preliminary Public Safety Site Plan dated January 23rd, 2019, prepared by Johnson Roberts Association, and which is specifically shown for purposes of this town meeting vote on a revised version of said plan dated February 6, 2019. So as you saw from the, there you go.
Any discussion?
Yeah.
And they have it handed out.
Okay. So as you heard from the consultant, there aren't any private properties of the dozen or so that they looked at. There's a couple of potential public properties, and one of them for the fire station is not suitable whatsoever, the one next to Town Hall, leaving only one site where the fire station could possibly go, and that would be the 11 John Wise Ave site.
If you want to speak to the article, I'd appreciate if you come up to either mic or the two, I believe there are two in the back. That would be helpful to move things right along. Thank you. Sorry, Lisa.
Lisa O'Donnell. The Town Building Committee, working with the architects, has gone through a whole process of site selection that they've outlined, and it's, we call it site selection, but it's really turned into a site elimination process in that there is no private land available, and we are looking at the town parcels. And the examination of the parcel of Memorial Park where the station sits now and adjacent to it is really impractical. It's unworkable. Our architects have rendered that decision to us. This leaves us with the John Wise Avenue site, and that's what we're putting before tonight. The intent here with having this motion to transfer the property from the Board of Public Works to the Board of Selectmen explicitly for the purposes of public safety is in order to finalize that vote so that we can move forward with a design by our architect. That design will be developed in the next several months and priced. Preliminary design, it won't be a final design. That whole design process will be in open session town building committee meetings that anyone and everyone is welcome to attend. And the intent is that we would, with that price, come back to annual town meeting in May for a vote on funding that fire station or public safety building. What actually goes there will be part of the design process. At a minimum, be a fire station. We'll definitely look at combining the police station with the fire station on that site. So that's the point of this article, is to set down with a town meeting vote that this is the site that we're going to use to develop public safety, and then we can move the design process forward from there.
Any further discussion?
Elizabeth Story, LeBaron Road. My question goes back 2 or 3 iterations on this process, but it's never really been answered in a way that I could understand. And so I'm going to pose it again now and hope for everyone's patience while people try to answer it again. It seems to me the reason that the site next to town, between Town Hall and the existing fire station isn't suitable is that the building footprint is so large. And my question is, why can't we come up with a design for a smaller building or a building oriented parallel to the road that is going to give us what we need for the trucks and the basics for the fire station without a lot of bells and whistles, and for considerably less money if it's on a site that we already own. And every time I've heard this question answered, it was, well, we have to have all these things. The committee has said so, the fire department and the police department have said so. But we're the people who are going to pay the bill, guys. And when I buy something, I usually start with what I can afford. And I haven't heard that discussion much in this process. I've heard, oh, it would be more expensive because of this and that, and there may be hazardous waste, and we have to replicate flood zone. I understand all those things. I do know when you really have to get something done for a certain amount of money, you really surprise yourself with the kind of solutions you can come up with. And I guess I'd like to put this on the table one more time. Can't we do something a little less palace-like and a little more suitable to a town with 3,500 people?
Lisa?
I'm going to do my best to address this question, and then I'm also going to ask our architect, who is a public safety design professional, to speak to it as well. There's nothing palace-like about what we're proposing. It is the essential facilities for the fire department. They have equipment that doesn't get any smaller. It needs room between the equipment for our safety systems. We've included training room and offices, storage for equipment. There's not fat in this design. There's not a whole lot we could conceivably take out that would make a difference. The parts of the building that may be negotiable, the vestibule and perhaps the physical training room, are such minuscule percentages that they're not going to change whether a site is viable or not. We can't take enough area out of what we need to do a credible job building a fire station and make it fit on the Memorial Park site. We're building a station that we need now. We also need to build a station for what we might need 50, even 100 years in the future. We can't cut corners just for the sake of trying to fit something and wedge it into a site that's not appropriate when we have a site that will fit it. So Dan wants to speak, and then I'm gonna ask the professionals to get up and address that as well, because they design fire stations all the time.
Go ahead, Dan.
Dan Doucette, Fire Chief, John Wise Ave. I guess I'm the king then, if this is the palace. The facilities in this building that are necessary are decontamination area for our firefighters, showers, necessary facilities to decon their gear and store their gear appropriately, to prevent taking home diseases and carcinogens to their family and their children. This isn't as I think you put it, it's a middle of the road. It's not a Honda, it's not a Cadillac, but it's the middle of the road. Will they be working with some of the spaces, trying to make it more palatable and less expensive and do it the way we've been trying to do? I think that's what we've been trying to do since the beginning. That's why, well, we won't go back to the 55 Main Street site, but that's a whole nother story. To come to the town with a project that wasn't going to fly again is why we went with this option. We've been directed to go towards town-owned property. People didn't want to buy property. We now went back to the town-owned property. Now we've made the decision that we need to stop wasting money on looking what could be at sites that aren't available, and we need to look at what we have. We need to design these buildings. Both the police and fire departments deserve clean, healthy facilities. This has been going on. I've been on the committee 9 years, and I think our ad hoc committee was another 3 years. We can't keep kicking this can down the road. I keep hearing these grenades people throw into the room. They want the smoke show. It's time. It's time to do this. Thank you.
Lisa, do they want to add anything, or would the consultants want to add anything to that, or the consultants want to add anything to that? Or
I'm going to ask him. I just want to add. I want to talk about this space here. Apparatus bays, hose wash and dry, medical equipment, and self-contained breathing apparatus equipment. It's 56% of the net area, and that's not negotiable. Bunker gear cleaning and storage, personal decontamination, workshop for equipment, ancillary storage, that's another 11.2%. Again, area that we can't compromise on. Locker room, changing and shower rooms, laundry, bunk room, and the training room, which is essential for training, that's another 17.5% of the area. That totals 85% of the area that's proposed. So there clearly isn't much wiggle room. In addition, there's another 10% approximately of areas that include a vestibule, kitchen, day room, office, storage, building support services. So that's 95% of what's on there. The other 5% is a public lobby and a physical training room. The physical training room, I think, is an incentive to attract call firefighters, which keep our costs $1 million a year below what Manchester's are, where they have a partial paid service. So at $1 million a year savings, to nickel and dime over a physical training center, that's something that's going to keep our guys in better shape. And that's the only thing that there's wiggle room in. So I'll turn it over to Stuart.
I don't know if there's too much more that I can add, but I can tell you that basically the size of the station is pretty much based on what the current needs are. So to really make it appreciably smaller, you'd have to eliminate existing firefighting equipment or have fewer firefighters. It's really based on what the needs of the town are right now. And there's really, as we design it, we are certainly going to be looking for efficiencies as we do the final design. But there's probably not a huge amount of square footage that we can really take out of the program.
Any other discussion? As I said, if you want to speak to an article, go to one of the mics. You have to raise your hand. You can come up here or that there.
My name is Bill Perkins, and I'm a former DBW commissioner. Hi, Walter. This proposal ignores the heartaches imposed on the neighbors of the John Wise site who purchased their homes confident for over 40 years that the town land was to be used exclusively for cemetery purposes and now face a significant devaluation in their most valuable asset. It also assumes that the cemetery can be used for the public safety building at no cost to the town because the town already owns the land and therefore do not have to buy it. The current cost evaluations for this property do not include the loss of revenue from the sale of from the sale of grave lots on this site, or the cost to acquire another piece of land for cemetery purposes when the current burial areas are full. The loss of revenue alone could be between $750 and to $1.2 million, depending on how you configure the new area. Who knows how much it might cost to acquire an alternative site for cemetery purposes? Another $1 million, maybe more. From the 1800s to the 1930s, the town actively sought to purchase property for cemetery purposes, starting with the initial large parcel on Spring Street and then purchasing additional adjoining parcels to accommodate future needs. You could say they were planning for the future. The parcel under consideration tonight was acquired in 1938, and the Selectmen's report of that year makes it clear that it was for the cemetery purposes. While this town meeting has the authority to change its designated use, is that the right thing to do for the town when you consider the big picture? Is this fire station on John Wise Avenue really the cheapest option when you consider all the costs? The loss of grave revenues, the cost of acquiring the property at 11 John Wise Avenue, and the additional cost of acquiring additional land for cemetery purposes. I don't think so. The studies made clear that the site, due to its size, is far less than ideal without the adjoining residential parcel. The access onto the busy highway is problematic and at a minimum will require a traffic light. Is this the best we can do? Are we planning for the future or trading the current problem for a future one? There is other raw land in Essex that may be better long-term solution for the town needs, would be a better long-term solution for the town's long-term needs than this approach. I urge you to vote no on this article. Thank you.
Andrew Spinney. This is a letter from the Department of Public Works to the Board of Selectmen, dated June 5th, 2018, Dear Board of Selectmen, the Board of Commissioners for the Department of Public Works would like to offer our position on an important current topic for the town of Essex. We will support the land use under our jurisdiction for the town's current public safety building situation. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Paul Penoyer, 57 Grove Street. I was wondering if the selectmen could just update us on what, if any, efforts have been made of discussions about regionalization or sharing of facilities, both police and fire. Obviously, and I do know Manchester has been interested in the past, if those discussions have been at all made, have they been serious, have they been professionally supervised? I know currently we're starting a discussion with regionalization this week about sharing facilities, and it seems to me that since this report won't be ready till March, that delaying or postponing consideration tonight would be the right move, so we have that information before us.
Lisa, you want to answer that?
I'd be glad to. Regarding the regionalization effort that the towns of Essex and Manchester have started, we're looking at a very broad spectrum across all the town services, and that is being done just to be fair to everyone. The reality of the matter regarding our fire department, and I've had this discussion with the fire department, I've had this discussion with numerous residents, and I recently posted this all on Facebook as well, is that our call fire department, I'm sorry, I should back up. The intent of the regionalization is that both towns would see either improved services or cost savings. And if both towns don't see either one of those, then it's a non-starter. Regarding our fire department, if we have a call fire department, full call fire department model, and we were to combine with a fire department that has paid employees, we would lose money. That's not cost effective for us. Furthermore, adding our first responders to the pool of responders in Manchester is going to diminish our services. So it costs more and provides less service. So essentially, there is no potential to regionalize the fire department whatsoever. And even if you did, which we're not going to, you still need a fire station with all of this stuff in your town. The effects for regionalization on fire are probably going to perhaps be like shared training classes or buying equipment in a pool or something like that. It's not going to be changing the scope of the fire station whatsoever. Regarding police, the feedback that I've had from residents, and I've talked to quite a few of you about this, is that there's really no support, very minimal support for regionalizing our police department. The most we would see in cost savings is maybe half of a chief's salary, and that would totally take away the community feel of our police force. The other complication there is that Chapter 41, blah, 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 Section 99B of the Mass General Laws provides this really cumbersome way you have to form a regional police district and appoint members, and it's really an untenable model for these two communities to embark on. So I don't see an opportunity to regionalize police either. Even if we did regionalize police, we would still need a station in our town. So when we're talking about the physical facilities, those aren't going to change in what our town needs.
Could I follow up with a question?
Go ahead, Paul.
Lisa, I don't doubt your knowledge of the subject, but I mean, this is a very serious consideration to take into account. And shouldn't we be having a professional study done on, the possibilities of regionalization? I understand, yes, the fire department probably needs to be centralized, but do the police stations need to be centralized? And couldn't we be sharing that with Manchester? And since there's never been any official study done, I think that's a very important place to go. And to rely on, several people's opinions, including just talking to residents, I don't think that's sufficient.
Okay.
Follow-up response to that, and then I think you're...
I'll stand by what I said, and that we still need the facilities in town, regardless of what happens. And I don't really see any opportunity for regionalization for either of those departments outside of some shared services or equipment.
I just have a question for the consultants. The slide you put up with the picture of, in sort of a reddish brown, of a building on the memorial next to Town Hall. looks substantially bigger to me, unless it was a completely different scale than this building. Can you explain or give us just a quick reference point? What's the square footage of the footprint in both of those examples?
So the program for the fire station calls for about a 15,000 square foot building, if I'm remembering correctly. Both of those buildings are the same size. They're both based on the same amount of information. They probably were not shown on the slide at the same scale. So I'm not surprised that one of them may have looked larger than the other by comparison. But the overall footprint of that brown one, that hand-drawn one, is actually a little smaller. The footprint's a little bit smaller than the one that's shown on John Wise, because some of that space is shown in an upper floor.
Any other discussion?
I'm Janet Carlson, 24 Apple Street. And as I think about Article 2, and I've also thought a lot about Article 1 this week, I'd like to suggest we think about both sites and consider police on John Wise if we really can't accommodate fire and police on the existing site. And the reason I say that, and I know we're only talking about Article 2 right now, the reason I say that is that police on John Wise would be a much lower profile building that would be less detrimental to the property values of the neighbors up there. And that would allow us to accommodate a fire building of the size that the fire personnel need, and we all recognize the important need of improving their facilities. So let's think about the existing site for fire, where the current building and Shepherd Memorial Drive might be able to accommodate the building, or the building could go parallel to the street and not invade the floodplain. I think there's a lot of parking spaces on all the designs, 40 spaces, which at some times are necessary, but I think we should continue to question the dedication of very valuable land to occasional parking. Thank you.
So a response to that?
Thank you. The architects have stated that putting the fire station at the existing site is not workable. And we would need to significantly compromise the area that would be dedicated to a building there. In addition, if we try and put fire where fire is existing now, we need to house them temporarily, and that's going to be a cost of anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million spent on rent. And we don't even actually have a place in town where we could locate a temporary fire facility. Shepherd Memorial Drive contains a sewer force main and a sewer main, and hazardous materials that have been found there. We would be spending money on moving the road, moving the force main, remediating the hazardous materials, temporarily supporting or housing fire somewhere. This is all money that we're spending and isn't actually going into the building. And if we're looking at value, what we want to do is put our money into the actual station. And the consultants have weighed in that it won't fit on that site anyway. So what this boils down to is that we have really one option here, and that's what we're asking you to approve tonight, and that's the John Wise Avenue site. Another thing to point out is in the construction market that we're in right now, construction costs escalate 5% a year. We've kicked this can down the road for so long. Our costs just keep getting greater and greater. We just actually need to start and do it.
Any other discussion? Hearing none or seeing none? Almost. Actually, Paul, you've already spoken twice on the article. I can't.
Oh, no, this is just to request a secret ballot. I may have jumped ahead of things.
Is that a motion for secret ballot?
Motion for secret ballot.
That's a majority. 20%?
20%.
20%. So all those in favor of a secret ballot, please raise your card. Oh, sorry, did we get a second on that? Please raise your card if you want a secret ballot.
Raise your cards high.
Yes. That's what I got. The motion fails. It's a 2/3 vote, so all those in favor of this article, please raise your card. Any opposed, please raise your cards. The motion passes. Mr. Spinney, Article 1.
I, Andrew Spinney, move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by purchase for purposes of a public safety building or buildings and/or associated features, the fee simple or other interest in certain real property and any buildings and improvements thereon and any related assets located at 11 John Wise Avenue, being shown as Assessor's Map 128, Lot 90, and is described in the deed recorded in the Essex South Registry of Deeds in Book 13057, page 288, and to transfer from the sale of the real estate fund this sum of $785,000 for such acquisition, and to further to authorize the selectmen to execute any and all instruments necessary to effectuate the purposes of this vote.
Is there a second? Discussion.
On this purchase price, when figuring in staircases and elevator retaining walls and what would be needed in a two-story building, it'd be a wash in price between the purchase of John Wise Ave and a two-story building on the cemetery lot alone. With this property, it would allow future expansion if needed, if our model was to change, and the ability to safely pull the trucks off of John Wise Ave instead of backing in off the street. I'd like you to consider this. Thank you.
I would kind of reiterate what Andrew said and reinforce what the architects had mentioned earlier, is that with this added site, it increases the property that's available for the facility by about 50%. It would allow us the opportunity to explore a couple of different options, and one would be doing a combined building for police and fire at this site. That would necessarily be a two-story building, obviously more expensive construction. However, that would be offset by building a single building instead of two. So that would be something that we would be able to explore at the outset. If that didn't prove feasible, what this parcel would allow us to do is to build a one-story fire station. Still have an apron that would allow the trucks to turn directly, just pull right off the street and then back into bays that would face to the side instead of to the street. We would eliminate retaining walls, which are expensive, and sorry, train of thought took off. The other things that this parcel would provide for the town is room for expansion. town is typically land poor, as evidenced by what a struggle it's been to get where we have gotten so far. And it would be sort of it would be a very prudent thing for the town to, if we're citing our public safety building there, to provide for expansion in the future. We don't know how long the call department is going to be sustainable. We hope for the foreseeable future at least. But it would be prudent for the town to purchase the extra property at pretty much a wash what it would cost to do a two-story facility anywhere, as Andrew and the architects have outlined already. The other thing that I would like to add is that as far as the neighborhood is concerned, having this additional parcel would provide us the opportunity to make this a more residential scale, a better design, essentially. What you would see from the street would be the side of a building that could be architecturally designed to blend better with the surroundings. The 4 bays would face to the side. The 2 property lines would not have the retaining walls and would have the opportunity for vegetative buffers between the abutters. So overall, it would be a much better architectural solution as well as a better solution economic-wise for building 1 story instead of 2. So that's my thoughts on that.
Any other discussion?
Joyce Bowden, John Wise Ave. Andrew, I noticed that you said, or you skipped the eminent domain clause when you read the article and substituted the price in. Is the eminent domain clause off the table even though it's still on the warrant?
It is off the table.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You still have a question?
Yes. Lisa?
You
I had a question.
You have to address it through me, and I'll direct it.
Yes, sir. So my question is this. I noticed in the schematic of the building that there was quite a lot of space allocated for dorms and officers' quarters and things like that. And yet, it was mentioned that we're not going to consider any regionalization, even though according to the article in the Gloucester Times, we had a $25,000 grant to study that. Is that correct? Or am I mistaken?
So we're not spending $25,000. We got a grant from the state for $25,000 to hire the consultant to study it. We're still studying regionalization. We're looking across all town departments. When we talk about regionalization, we're not talking about just our public safety services. We're talking about all features of town government. So that money will be put to good use. In addition, while they may not look at regionalizing the departments in a manner that our school district is regionalized, they will look at shared services, because this regionalization takes a whole scope of sharing a pencil sharpener with someone all the way to the model of the regional school district. So there are a lot of ways we can find economies in shared services, bulk purchasing power, things like that, whether it's a training seminar that the fire department needs and they join not just with Manchester, but 3 other towns and have that together. So there's going to be a wide range of what they are studying for that $25,000, which was grant money.
But we won't have the results of that grant before we take this vote. Is that correct?
We're not going to have a conversation. You have to have a specific.
Okay, then I motion to table the discussion until the town meeting. Does anyone want to second that?
I usually ask for a second. Would there be a second to that? Hearing none. Did I hear a motion? Second? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. So do you have a second? Well, but if we're going to definitely postpone this, then there's no more discussion.
You had a discussion about whether or not to postpone.
I think he seconded it. Did you second it, sir? I'm sorry. Okay. Go ahead. I will need a motion in writing, yes.
Okay. So, then, I guess with Robert's Rules of Orders, I thought if I motioned to table, that if it was second, there was no discussion, but it's not second, so...
There is a
we-
discussion after it's seconded, yes. So any discussion now that we have a second on the motion? I'll need the motion in writing, too.
Okay.
Go ahead, you have the floor.
Okay, so my thought is that if we have a grant for $25,000 to consider the benefits of regionalization, and other departments have seen fiscal benefits from that, that perhaps we should wait to, as you said, if it's already been kicked down the road multiple times, to wait another 3 months to find out if we could benefit from that before we lay out $700,000 to buy another property.
Is there any other discussion on the motion to table?
Escalation continues, and I think regardless of what the regionalization studies uncover, we still need a station for both departments, for police and for fire. And so the regionalization is not going to uncover large areas of square footage that we're going to save in the stations. It's simply area that we need for the public safety departments to conduct their business safely and properly. And regionalization studies aren't going to change that.
Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion? Oh, Wesley.
Good evening. Wesley Burnham, 22 County Road. The gist of what we're discussing on this article really isn't whether we're going to regionalize or not. We, to the best of my knowledge, are not interested because there is no benefit to regionalize the fire department. Maybe stuff in the Board of Health or accounting office or whatever. They may find some benefit along the way, but police and fire have already been pretty well left out. The importance of passing this article is to at least allow the selectmen to continue to negotiate with the property owners. If they come to an agreement, then we can safely maneuver our fire vehicles much better than taking up all 4 lanes, crossing 133 so we can line up and pull in. I don't know how many of you people have watched us pull into the current station, but the ladder truck is all the way to the lawn on the Winthrop Street side of the street to get lined up so we can get it back in the barn. And that'll be a similar situation down there. The equipment has grown considerably, and I'm going to be retiring the end of the year with 46 years. The trucks have grown considerably. The first trucks that we had, you could put 2 people in. And even that was tight, because we didn't have SCBAs back then. We don't carry all the equipment. But we need to be able to accommodate that stuff, as well as exhaust collection systems in the barn. So we're looking at, there's very little room to shrink the building. What we really need is some maneuvering space. So I would like to ask you to at least allow the selectmen to continue to negotiate with the current property owners. If it comes to fruition, great. If it doesn't, then we'll move on with just the current site. Thank you.
Before we go on, Joyce, do you have your motion in writing? Yes? I need it up here to know what it is. You have to wait just a second. Yes, go ahead, thanks. So the motion reads to Article 1 be postponed until study of regionalization is completed and the information obtained considered at the annual town meeting. Just so you know, you can't postpone it to another particular meeting. You can postpone it indefinitely, but you can't make us, the town meeting, put it on another town meeting. It has to go on a ballot or an article or a warrant. It can't, I would not be able to have this stick and say, put it on the next annual meeting. It can't. I can postpone it, but I cannot postpone it to the next annual meeting. So everyone understands that the article reads to put it on the next annual meeting, which we cannot do, but we can postpone it if it passes, just so everyone understands. So, any other discussion on the amendment to the postponement? She did. She did make, had the floor when she postponed. And it was seconded. So I need a discussion on the motion to postpone this article. All those in favor of postponing this article, please raise your card. All those against postponing this article. We will now move back to Article 1. The motion did fail. Any other further discussion on Article 1?
My name is John Hickey, and I'm on Belcher Street in Essex. I just want to say a few things. I appreciate the work that the committee has done for this article. I'm glad we had the opportunity to voice our opinions and to help guide the group any way we could. I do have a question for the architects. This may have nothing to do, but has there been any preliminary budget put together for these two facilities, the one on John Wise and the one, an existing fire station? And then my second question is there a preliminary budget been put together for both the fire and police station in one location on John Wise?
Any answer for that? Lisa?
I'll handle that. Right now, we're engaged in a site selection process, as I mentioned before, to determine sites that would actually fit the departments. And that's been the gist of the effort so far. The only estimates, and Johnson Roberts can speak to this as well, it's not an overall project estimate, but what we've looked at is the differentials between different options, in that a particular option would cost more because you have a certain amount of site work that needs to be done or something like that. So we've tried to parse out what the cost differences would be without putting a budget on it. We're not at a design stage yet where we can put pricing numbers on. What we're trying to do here is nail down a site, and when we have a site selected, then the architect will go to work and design, and then in that process will be, like I've mentioned before, an open public process in town building committee meetings of determining what those stations look like. And that effort is intended to bring a preliminary design to town meeting in May along with the proposal for the price. So that's where we are. Worth mentioning, we do know that the existing site, while not feasible, also carries a lot of extra costs that I mentioned before with regard to moving road, temporary housing, sewer, and hazardous material remediation. That, again, is money that we don't spend on actual buildings, so that's why we're at the John Wise Avenue site. So there really hasn't been a need for cost comparison yet, because we've just figured out where we can actually do this, and that was our last vote, thank you very much, that we can put it on the John Wise Avenue site, and now we're just looking for the opportunity to make that site better so that we can build a more efficient building and provide the safety features that our call firefighters need. That answer? No, I know, because I didn't give you a number, but we don't have a number.
Any other discussion? I think I saw you.
Hi, Larissa Carter from Western Ave.
Can you say that again, please?
Sorry. Larissa Carter, 48 Western Ave. So I want to start by saying that I'm definitely not opposed to the fire station going into John Wise, and I also really appreciate the thorough work that a lot of people, including the selectmen, have done. Last year, when, Lisa, you were kind enough to come to meet with our neighborhood group, you put forward some numbers that I think were also on the website about initial studies that were done for a combined police and fire station on, in the current site, on John Wise, and this was when we were comparing it with the village. So the architects at that time had deemed that it was possible to do a combined building at both the Martin Street location as well as the John Wise location. So I guess my question is, before we start talking about buying additional property, and while we are talking about projects that we don't have costs for yet, and because the buildings haven't even been designed yet, are we prematurely making a decision about buying extra land without looking into every option to ensure that we're being most efficient with the designs that we come up with?
The designs that were done before Johnson Roberts was brought on in November after Fall Town Meeting were not as thorough as the work that they've done, and were more preliminary state studies to try and assess, again, available and viable sites. So at this point now, we've really started from scratch with Johnson Roberts Associates, and we're developing the designs that we think are workable. So a lot of the previous work really isn't irrelevant to the process that we're in now, because we've actually engaged the owner's project manager and the project architects, and they're taking a lot harder, more careful look at not just building volumes, but site access, driveways, parking areas, and things like that. So it's a more detailed design that they're getting into as far as site selection and the space needs on a particular site. So this is a more firm process. As far as getting price numbers yet, it's premature. We're still working on the design, and as I said, the need right now is to finalize the site so that we can move forward with that design. I'm not sure if I fully answered the question, but I tried.
Any other discussion?
Kevin Cook, Martin Street. I, for one, before I start, am all for buying the property. I think that would be great, but my question is, in order to vote, I guess I'm confused because I haven't read, and I don't think the actual article that's being considered here today has been published for us to read, and when it was read here today, it excluded the phrase eminent domain, but I believe it included the words or otherwise. So I guess my only problem is, yes, buy the property, negotiate. Frankly, I'd pay a premium to give our firemen what I think they deserve, but my only concern is, does the phrase or otherwise include eminent domain? And has the article actually been published so we can review it and vote on it?
The article was published in the warrant, and the motion excluded the eminent domain, which is fine in my mind. I know, the article was published, the motion is separate.
Are you saying it was published orally or in writing?
The article was published in the warrant. The motion can be different that you have in front of you that was read at the meeting. So the article was published in the warrant. The motion that was read is what is in front of you right now, which did exclude eminent domain. Is that accurate?
Does or otherwise include eminent domain or not?
No. Otherwise. The motion I'll just read the motion again.
That would be fine, thank you.
It says, I, Andrew Spinney, move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by purchase for the purpose of public safety building or buildings and/or associated features, the fee simple or other interest in certain real property, and any buildings and improvements thereupon, and any assets located at 11 John Wise Ave being shown on the map, transfer from sale of real estate fund to the sum of $850,000 for such acquisition, and further to authorize the selectmen to execute any and all instruments necessary to effectuate the purpose of that vote. That does not include eminent domain.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Rob?
Wait, just to clarify, does the warrant say $780 or $850,000?
I'm sorry, 785.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to the Article 1. All those in favor of Article 1, please raise your card. All those opposed? It passes. So just for the record, that was a 2/3 vote. And it passed by 2/3. It wasn't. Otherwise, I would. Because there's a discrepancy. The motion to adjourn. All those in favor, go home.